So what I'm showing you here is a search. So what I have done is I typed in, and what you can do is with any address that's a multifamily property in 38 states, because that's what our API reach is, you can type in an address and then you can immediately get a litany of information, comps, all of the above. But what you also have the ability is refine all of that data. So what I did is I typed in an address here, and just by typing in the address, I immediately got an evaluation summary of that property. Now, that property is the compilation of, as I scroll down, not only just the gross rent multiplier method, it's got a price per door application, it's got a price per square foot application, it's got an NOI cap rate application, and it also has a market growth methodology. Now, the market growth methodology is interesting. Now, it's not applicable here because this property hasn't traded hands in the last 7 years. If a property had traded hands in the last 7 years, we literally, through AVA, have the ability to refine what was, applied to what is now, and comps and what market rents are, and all of those different factors that define value, to come with actually a fifth methodology for what is the value of this property. Now, what you'll notice is there are differences here between the GRM value, price per door, and price per square foot. What's not included here, not checked here, is the NOI cap rate, because it's outside the range of value. Now, just like when you type in a Zillow address for residential, you get a response, right? Your property's worth X. What you don't get is the ability to refine that methodology. So when I click on one of these dynamics, when I use gross rent multiplier, here's the first secret sauce dynamic of what is AVA. Because AVA pulled up an algorithmic rent roll, we make assumptions. We're using Zillow for our rents. We're using a couple of other API feeds so that in that geographic area of town, of wherever that property is, we're looking, what is the average for a 1-bedroom for rent? What's the average for a 2-bedroom? What is the average for a 3-bedroom? So we plug in that data, but then through AVA, you have the ability to refine these values. So when I'm looking at studios, what if I look at this and the pre-populated algorithm said a makeup of 1 studio, 18 ones, and 3 twos? I go, no, I've got 4 studios, and I've got fewer 1-bedrooms. Now you'll notice it's a 22-unit building, right? And the building square footage is this, the lot square footage is this. We give you a snapshot of what all of the initial data points that we need to start to determine value. We know when this last sold. We know what it sold for. So now here in 2023, the world has changed. And we're starting to see that reflected in the values that we're coming up with here. And so, but let's finish this refinement dynamic, right? Let's say I've got 4 twos, 15 ones, and 4 studios. Well, the algorithm is telling us you've added a unit that you don't have. So this is just for our purposes. So let's say that's it. But my rents are not 16, 23, and 3,000. My rents actually are about 1,750. My twos are really on average 2,200. My ones and my twos, I'm getting about 3,150. Now I've refined the unit mix. I've refined what is my rents, and now you'll see up here on the left, I have a refined valuation based on these criteria, which is corresponding to here. Now, what's interesting here is using the growth rent multiplier methodology, we start with income, right? And so that's the total income. I also have the ability now to look at what are the average area gross rent multiplier factors, right? So we're saying it's a 13.05. But from here, I can immediately go, and this is where you can't do this with Zillow. I go here, and now I see my 1305, but I start to look at the comps in the area. Now I can see with each one of these comps, this is the subject property, right? So I click on that, I can go to a street view of the property, and I can see that that's the building. Okay, that's a good reference point for me. So I get out of that photo. So now look at what you've got here. You've got, remember I talked about price per door, I talked about gross rent multiplier, and I talked about price per square foot when it came to evaluating my different methodologies, right? That were part of my summary.
Right.
I can hear, they notice I've changed the refined value here, which starts to change my refined values here. This is the pre-populated using all of this data before refinement. And then after refinement, it starts to change the weighting of the property and what it ultimately is worth. And now let's go back to my sales comps. So I look at my comps. Now what AVA does, it pulls comps based on the proximity to the property, and I can go out 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. It also gives you the ability to look at relevant comps in terms of similar unit sizes. So you'll notice 28 units. Our subject property is 22 units, right? 28 units, 18 units, 10 units, 11 units, 9 units. It's pulling all those comps in the area. But what's interesting is some of these comps, now that's City of LA, that's that's Santa Monica. So I'm probably not going to use Santa Monica comps because, and it's also a smaller building, the gross rent multipliers are different there than they are elsewhere. So I'm going to take out this comp. Now watch what happens as I start to take out any of these dynamics, right? Price per door, I take out 535, it reduces that. This reduces that. It's now recalibrating all of the different dynamics. This comp, 11 units in Santa Monica, I'm going to get rid of that as well. And you'll notice it grays out that comp. I like LaGrange. I'm going to keep that comp. It's 1.4 miles away. But it's only 9 units. I may, you know what, I'm going to strike that one too. I need bigger units. So I'm going to get rid of Overland. But I love Mississippi, 17 units, built in 17, right? So I can look at 20 units, Fairburn, 9 units, smaller building. I'm probably going to get rid of that building. 20th Street, going to get rid of that building. You see what's changing here in real time, these different dynamics. I'm going to get rid of this building as well. Now, if but I like this building. Let's get that building. That's to our benefit. Palms is busy street. We're not in a busy street, but I like 16 units, so I'm going to bring that one back into the equation. So now, as I'm looking at all of these different comps, I've applied the ones that I want. I look at the fact that they're in a geographic area, may not want Culver City. So I'm going to get rid of that comp. So these are the comps that I pick. And now I go, I go back to the top and I look at my valuations and look how it's starting to change the value. So I picked up more of these comps that are relevant and it starts to change. One of the dynamics that we've got is that we're pulling comps from DataTree. That's a First American Title Company product. So we're getting on-market and off-market comps. So it's not just the things that are in the MLS. We're seeing everything that's selling. So we're getting very accurate comp sets. Yes. So CoStar is doing 2 things. They're pulling comps from public record. They've got an army of individuals, and they're creating relationships with brokers and operators and general partners. And they're asking about deals. They're saying, what did that close for? I saw this deal. What was the rent roll? They're going to ask for that information. Sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes it isn't. So there's not an exact science whether you're CoStar or whether you're Ava, but the fact that we have the ability, like if you know of a certain comp, and let's say if a comp were relevant to the subject property, you could just type that comp in here, and then you'd get the analysis of that comparable. You then could make the refinements just the same way we're doing it here. If federal was a comp that you wanted to use, I'm going, okay, the algorithm said it was this, but I know that this is much more in line with what it is. And I can also, here's what's fun. I can compare average rents in that area. So these are the custom refinements that I would make. But I know that in the area for older buildings, these are the legacy average rents for studios, 1s, 2s, and 3s. This is stabilized market. And this is if it's brand new with amenities and other things. So Ava gives you tremendous resource to look at a host of data points to really drill down and say, what are the most accurate comps for me to use? What is the most relevant gross rent multipliers to use? All of these different dynamics. And you'll notice because we changed the GRM, we refined it, it used the new average GRM as opposed to, if you wanted to go back to that GRM, you could say, well, wait a minute. I know that the GRM in that area is 14. So then you can change that, and that becomes your reference point. So you have great resources to do that, and you can also do that with the rent comps. So you can look at all the area rent comps. Now, the interesting thing about this, because we know what the rents are for this building because they're published and we can have access to them. So we know what these rents are really doing in real time versus an average. We can also start to forecast out what is this building going to be worth over the course of time. And here we're using Moody's data of empirical 10 years back of what was the average increase consumer index or whatever they're going to with the reference point they're going to use for what the rents could, how they could be raised any given year. And this was the empirical data. And then Moody's is projecting forward. So we're using that. But let's say in this year, in 2026, you do a major renovation where you go, well, we're going to improve easily 5% in terms of our rents. It then pushes everything going forward into the ultimate future valuation. We can see if I bought it for this, what the increased value is. That's a 54% increase. If I amortize that over 10 years, it's a 5.4% increase in value. All of these details you can do, and you can also then generate documentation if you were going to use this to promote the property in some form or fashion. And you can do all of these inputs. You can input photos, mapping, sales comps, the comps that you pick, and you can bring those into the equation. I can click the different comps that I want, and they'll start bringing in your comps that you would for any offering memorandum. You can do the same for rents, pop in the ones you want, and you can rearrange them, and then you can publish it. This would help you analyze any property that you've identified.
So you need to identify the property first.
Correct. We're not doing a scan of how many properties are on the market right now that are giving me a 13 times multiple. This is right now. See, the future of Ava is being able to do all that stuff. We didn't talk about the NOI cap rate, and this is really good. You have the ability with this dynamic, and a lot of people, depends on what your comfort zone is and how you evaluate a property, right? So now we've created something where you can punch in all of the expenses, all of the income. You see it's pre-populated here. Is there laundry? Yeah, I'm getting $200 a month. That's $2,400 a year. That starts to change the dynamic here, which will change the ultimate value of the property, right? And I can do all of my expenses. I can add rows. I can delete rows. I can do it's a veritable working spreadsheet for me to then come up to a value. And if I go, well, my cap rate's really only 3 right now, then you change the value. And the beauty of it is we've built the technology. The reason we have stalled in the moment is simply it costs us anywhere between $1 and about $5 for the API feeds for each call. So if we have the money to pay for the calls, as we start to create intelligence, we'll rely less heavily on some of the data feeds. Like CoreLogic is one of the feeds. DataTree, as I said, is one of the feeds. Zillow's cheap. MLSs are really cheap. Our MLS feed, which gives us a lot of the data, that's only $5,000 for the whole year, and that's unlimited.